Lexie Obey is a Piapot First Nations woman and a trail runner who recently started a beautiful short film titled Miyo-Kiyokâwin, which means visiting in a good way. In this film, Lexie explores her connection with the land and the often difficult balance of using extreme sports to either conquer the mountain or visit the mountain. It's my honour to talk to Lexie about building reciprocity with the land and how to start making that important shift in perspective from seeing land as a thing to land as a being. We also talk about doing hard things like trail running as a path to finding joy, what it's like to be both environmentally conscious and be a tree planter in Canada, and how individualism and spiritual connection with land and nature are diametrically opposed. It's my great honour to have my good friend Lexie Obey on the Journey podcast, and I hope you find as much joy and value in this conversation as I did. Good morning, Lexie Obey. Thank you for being here with me on the Journey podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really excited to have you here talking with me. We've had a lot of really amazing conversations in the time that we've known each other, and I'm excited to have another one. And I'm really excited to talk about a movie that you just featured in, which is now on YouTube, which I will put in the show notes so that people can watch it. Miyo-Kiyokâwin, which means visiting in a good way. And it's a really beautiful 5-minute short about you exploring your connection to land in the mountains. And my take on it was sort of uncovering what that meant for you through different pursuits like trail running and climbing and being in a new place. And when I watched it, first of all, I was really impressed by just how beautiful it looked and how happy you looked in it. And I was just really excited to maybe dissect that a little bit more, because you said some really powerful stuff in there. And I'd love to know, just by starting, if you could just talk to me a little bit more about why that feels important to you, why that connection feels important to you.
Ah, it's actually really interesting because I feel like since it's come out, um, people have said, "Oh, I've watched your film. It's a really good film," and which is really great. But it's crazy how much work goes into something that people only see 5 minutes of, or how much thought and details go into it. Um, yeah, I think when I moved to Canmore, Alberta, which was last July, I there there's something inherently that drew me to the town, which is like trail running and access to like being able to climb after work, and like there's just a network of beautiful trails and mountains like literally out your front door, and like-minded people that like to do the same things that you do that maybe I've never found in the city before. And but there's also this other culture of like athletic pursuits and like these conversations that easily come up that are like, "Oh, what are you going to do this weekend?" And it can at times kind of feel ego-y, but I don't think it's intentionally trying to feel ego-y. We're just like also passionate about what we do. But there was like no larger conversation about like why we do what we do, in terms of like how it makes us feel. And or I think like I'm Cree and like an indigenous person, and I think a lot about what that means to me, and a lot of that like about how my ancestors used to live, and um the things that were taught in ceremony, and like how we are all interconnected, and how that it just didn't feel like there was a space for that here, and I was struggling to be like, how do I fit into all of it? And I think I came to the conclusion that if it's not here, then maybe I could be a part of like starting the larger conversation. And I think that's how it all kind of came to be anyways.
And do you sort of perceive that as something that is perhaps missing, or that there's room to grow, to, that larger conversation of how we engage with the land beyond the athleticism? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I would hope
Yeah,
so.
yeah, for sure. It's an interesting concept, because I'm sure we'll get more into this, but I mean, you are an athletic person, and we'll definitely touch more on that in this episode. You are very athletic, and there's you do a lot of really cool stuff in the mountains, and so there obviously is that dual nature of the relationship there of I go and do these athletic things, but you do them outdoors in an outdoor space, in an outdoor environment. And in my experience, being a climber, which we can talk about further, I'll often go to the crag and I'll climb something, and it's only when I've got to the top that I stop and take in the view. And
Mhm.
if I'm projecting, if I'm climbing quite hard, if I don't achieve the goal, I might go to the crag, spend 3 hours there, go home, and not really pay attention to my surroundings.
Yeah. I do it all of the time. Like, I do, and that was a part of, like, the dialogue I had between my friend and I who shot the film, of being like, like, so how do the two worlds merge? Is it like as you're on a run? And I'm like, no, because sometimes I go on trail runs and I don't feel connected at all. Like, and it, and I'm, and I would love to, but I just know that there's not always a space there for it. It's like I have an hour and I like need to run because it makes me a better person. But like it's not like I like intentionally feel like I'm in relationships with the land. And I feel like I have this like kind of a ritual routine that I like, it's kind of where the film began, and the idea of the film is like I moved here and I do all of these activities, but also I like walk my dog every morning to like the Bow River, and I like sit on the shores and I kind of just take a second. And like throughout the whole summer I was also unemployed, so I had a lot of time to do this. But like I would like just go and sit there, and I felt like I learned so much of just like ways in which like the land was like whispering little teachings to me that like you could like read it in a book, but you would never like understand it quite the same. Like you can like I just feel like if you try to nourish deep connections with the land because she is living, that like she'll give you information and teachings that you can like metabolize with your heart and you can't necessarily intellectualize. And I feel like the more that I go to that spot, the more I get that. And that's like a part of the piece of me being able to live here and do the other things. Like I couldn't, and that's like a, I don't know if that part made the film off the top of my head, but it's like I couldn't just trail run all the time and feel super fulfilled. Like I couldn't go to the ski to like the mountain and just ski all day and be like, I feel super connected, because I inherently don't. And like it's like these other intentional aspects of my life that I try to prioritize too that make me feel like I'm more of like a well-rounded human.
Mm, I totally get what you mean. I'm very lucky to live on a lake here in Ontario. I live on Lake Eugenia, and watching each morning, watching it change seasonally, and each morning I take a moment. Sometimes it's 2 minutes, sometimes it's 10, and I go and stand outside. And now that it's warm enough, I stand outside in bare feet.
Yeah.
And there's there's a feeling you get in your body when you stop and listen, not just with your ears, but you like listen with, I would call it listen with your energetic being. And you truly can feel, if not hear, things being said to you. And
Mhm.
you, I don't have the words for what those things are. It's a body feeling. But the more I lean into that, the more I, in my experience, start to build a relationship, and then I start to care more, and then I build more reciprocity. And then, for example, when I went climbing yesterday, I didn't go and climb, I didn't go with the intention of climbing really hard or anything like that, but I did take extra time to just stop and look, or stop and feel and appreciate the touch of the rock. Or I was halfway up a climb and an eagle flew over me, and I just was like, whoa. And probably a previous version of that, of me, would have maybe still seen the eagle, but wouldn't have cared so much. It would have been more focused on the goal. And I
Yeah.
think for me, that's very much that relationship is built from simply being, going somewhere, or even if it's just your home, to just be in the presence of land, and like what you said in your film, to visit with rather than conquer. And the reciprocity piece, I think, is a word that's really coming to me a lot at the moment, because I'm reading Braiding Sweetgrass, which talks a lot about
Mm.
reciprocity with land. And when I watched your film again, in the opening line, you say that you value respect, reciprocity, and love. And so I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about specifically reciprocity with the land and what that means to you or what you're uncovering.
I think I'm still trying to figure that out. Like, I think it would be easy to be like, what are tangible ways I could be reciprocal? And that could be like, oh, maybe I can volunteer or, I don't know, pick up trash when I see it. And like, yes, those are all good things, but I think a a part of taking time is like actually haven't figured that out. And but one thing I feel like I'm exploring is like being in relationships with the land and seeing the land as its own like spirit and being, in which it is, and thinking about like I've been in romantic relationships or friendships, and you think about like what does it take to nourish these relationships with other human beings. And it's easy when you're in a romantic relationship to be like it takes time and communication and like lots of investment to really get to know the person, and you're like constantly trying to like understand this other human being that you love. And I just like being like, what does that mean for the land? Like how do I, like when I go to the river, when I visit these different places, how am I like, even like I thought in the last summer I was like, okay, I come frequently and I know this area and this land somewhat, just a little bit in the summertime, but I wonder how she like changes throughout the seasons, and like what small things can I notice, and like love is like a lifelong investment. And so I think of that in that way. It's like it's not something that like you could check the box about, but it's like this deep nourishing maybe over your entire lifetime. Um and I know that's not doesn't sound reciprocal in nature, but I think sometimes maybe even with me and you, like if we just like took the morning to drink coffee and talk to each other, that would be so much more meaningful than like if you ever bought me a present or like I don't know. And so like I kind of think of it in that way. It's like maybe I'm trying to do my due diligence and respect to our relationship by spending time with her in a very intentional way. And maybe other forms of reciprocity will come into play when they need to, but I just don't have super tangible, I don't know, takeaways on like what it actually looks like. And more than it's just like, I just see it as a relationship I'm trying to nourish over time.
So it sounds like the beginning of reciprocity is just awareness and attention and love, and then the rest will evolve over time.
Maybe, or for me at least right now, like I really don't have the answers, and I think maybe somebody else has figured something else out that is super meaningful to them, and I would love to hear that too. But
Yeah,
this
I
is just
truly,
what I've come to.
for sure, and I think that that's something that probably everybody's journey is going to be totally different, and it's going to mean something different for them. In terms of yours and my relationship, I don't think I've ever bought you a present, and I don't think you've ever bought me a present. But hey, we're doing okay. And my favorite memories with you are sitting in the back of a dirty tree planting truck and yeah, or just drinking coffee or whatever, and that's so true. So maybe it does just start with that presence it and the rest will grow from there.
Yeah. I think you could like shave away everything material in the world and you would be like, I just want to hang out with my favorite people. And you're like, I don't need anything to do that. We could be like sitting in a dumpster and you'd be like, this is great.
Yeah, and the jury's in on how good for us love is. The more a person loves, the more a person gives within healthy boundaries, the physically healthier and the spiritually healthier that person is going to be. So, in my mind, there's no reason why that can't also extend to the land. I'm curious what you think of that.
No, 100%. And if not, like in the moments I've felt like the most alone, like say even moving here, it's like I didn't know that many people. And I was kind of like turning this really new chapter in my life. And I felt there was a lot of times of loneliness. And I remember just going out there and being like, but I could never be alone because, like the land is holding me and the birds are singing and I can hear the river. And, she sometimes whispers like little life lessons to me too, or like I would just sit there and sometimes cry, and like I'd imagine all of my tears flowing into the river and being taken away, and I'm like, oh, she takes care of me, like like and it's like, yeah, I don't know. So yes, I think that you could be definitely you could see the land as something, even like a primary relationship almost.
Hmm. Do you think so that what you just described there, that's something that I'm actively trying to cultivate in my life, but that's not something that comes naturally to me at all.
Mm,
I mean, my heritage is very colonial, Puritan. Like my grandparents went to Africa and worked the soil and effectively like conquered the land, and that. So for me, I'm like, and I'm very gladly and willingly undoing that narrative and trying to build a narrative of reciprocity. But is that, I would imagine, and please speak to me being right or wrong about this, but being indigenous, that's not the case for you. You've probably have already, I would, a stronger relationship with land than maybe someone who, from my perspective, would have.
I'd like to think that it's like in a way in my like DNA, but like I'd like to think like the thousands of generations before me have like it's just like kind of in the cells of my being. Um but also I grew up in the city. Like I lived in a city until like 4 years ago and was like would almost never leave. Like we went on camping trips as a child, but like once or twice a summer. And I was in Boy Scouts when I was like a small child. I think everyone grows up and they're like, why am I the way I am? And I am like very outdoorsy, quote unquote, and like to be outside and go on these long, fun adventures. And none of my family is quite the same in like being drawn this way. And I'm like, maybe it was like the Boy Scouts or like I don't know. So I think in ways I could say yes. I would like to think that like I do come from the land, and so that could come easier to me. But also, I think there's been a coming back because I have been in the concrete jungle a little bit, or like, which is like urban spaces are still very much the land. Everything comes from the land and is made from it. But I don't know. I don't know if it comes more natural, or if at some point we all have to do a little undoing.
Mm. Well, we all have to do a little undoing, in my experience.
Yeah. Like we're
So
all pretty much in the society.
yeah, totally. Yeah, and we have to choose at what level we engage with that and where and how. You did
Yeah.
mention that's something I was going to ask you. This last year you moved to Canmore in August, I believe it was, and obviously a new town and a new moving to the mountain culture. Obviously, being a tree planter, a former tree planter as I am, we spent a lot of time in the mountains, but they were never our home. But you've
Mhm.
chosen to make Canmore your home, and you also kind of mentioned this in your film. This change in physical place has sort of started this change in exploring your relationship with land. So I guess that's a pivotal piece then. If this idea of exploring this relationship kind of came after this move, and so, or correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what it seemed like. So I'm curious if maybe there was you get to this mountain town where you have more land around you and it's so much easier to engage with it, is maybe there's a feeling of like waking up there or that being unearthed.
I don't think so per se. Maybe it feels that way, but I think this has been like a very long journey. Um and I think I just because I live in a house now, I didn't live in a house for years. Um it feels like I have to be more intentional with it.
Mm,
And so maybe like when you're tree planting, you live in a tent and you can feel the sun in the morning and you can hear the birds. And like last summer, we were like by a little stream that you could also hear. And it's just so a part of your everyday life. And so I've done that for 4 years. And then I've lived out of my car, and there's nowhere to move when you're in your car. So when you get out, you're outside. And so
mm,
just by nature, I spent a lot of the last 4 years outside. And when you're planting or when you're living in your car, you're so aware of the elements and like the ways the weather changes, and knowing that you have to you could wish that there's no rain, but that doesn't do you any well. So you like have to wholeheartedly accept that there's going to be rain, and see yourself in it. And I think that was such a good lesson that I've learned in the last 5 years, is to be like, like, who are we as humans to wish that nature changes around us or for us? Like, how entitled that is. And like, and to be like, oh, I've accepted, like, that was, I feel like, just like a big lesson in that, to like have to do that for 4 years. And now I live in a house, and it's so easy to escape all of those things. Like, I have to intentionally leave my house every morning to see the sun, and like, and not that I don't do that, but I have to think about it, and it's so much easier to choose comfort now than it was in the last chapter of my life. And so I think maybe that's where it feeling like I'm thinking about what that all means has started with this move. I think just because it is a different life trajectory than what I was on.
Yeah, okay, that's super interesting. I resonate when you say it's easier to choose comfort. The last few years, there wasn't a lot of comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah, comfort was like, oh, my tent is not wet today. That's comfort.
Yeah.
That's as good as it gets. Okay, Lex. So, you've recently moved to Canmore, and Canmore is obviously a pretty whitewashed town. And so I'm curious, how much do you feel there's room there for you to bring your Indigenous worldview and knowledge and wisdom kind of into that space and help affect a positive change there?
I think in ways I am. And when I moved here, I also got a job with the Stony Nakota. Like, I work a lot in the Stony Nakota community, which is like, this is their traditional territory. Like, they have been here since like time immemorial. And so I think that has been such a unique learning opportunity for me too, because I'm not Stony Nakota, I'm Plains Cree. And so being able to be like, what does it mean to be a visitor? And then, but also still having this like larger Indigenous community around me. Well, I live in a town that is inherently very privileged. You have to be very privileged to live and work here in a lot of ways. Um, and so I think that has been fantastic. And I think my job, I see it as like whatever I can do to support the community in any capacity, um, as like a helper, is like, that's how I see that. But then also like, I work for this other nonprofit with like one of my really good friends who's Blackfoot, and she also lives here. And so I chose Canmore because I had a couple of friends beforehand, but I also had like an Indigenous friend. And so I was like, there's another Indigenous woman in the mountains, like in a town, like making it work. And just like, it was like such a small piece of community, but like a really important factor in me choosing a place to live. Um, but we are trying to build community by offering like access to mountain sports like mountain biking and climbing and running and stuff, like for Black, Indigenous, and people of colors. And so in a way, that has been a really great way to continue to have these conversations and be surrounded by people that are like-minded and maybe have similar life experiences that aren't reflective in like the town population, quote unquote. But I think maybe my experience has been very different because I've moved to Canmore and I've still been surrounded very much by community. Um, but that's also what I'm seeking out.
Mhm. Okay, let's pivot a little bit here because we've talked a lot about land and connection and visiting the land, and at the same time, you also happen to be a pretty serious trail runner who recently ran the Canmore Quad, which
Whoa, I wouldn't say
is,
this.
well, a lot more serious than me, which is 57 kilometers total distance, I believe, and total 4,800 meters of elevation, and 4 mountain peaks.
um, yeah, so for the sake of truth facting, I ran what I call the Canmore Quad Mod. Um,
Okay.
and so a little, those numbers are a little bit off. Not that it really matters. because it wasn't about the numbers. But um, the last peak was closed due to construction, like trail maintenance and stuff. And so I traversed across the base of it to a different one. And so it added on. It's kind of so absurd in nature because nobody would ever do it. Like lots of people do the Canmore quad, like lots. Like I thought everybody did it. That's kind of why I was like, oh, I should do it too. If if everybody can do it, like maybe I can do it. Like it was more of like a let's believe in yourself to do these things. But nobody does the Canmore quad mod. It's absurd. Nobody would. It's silly. But it was like 62 kilometers and 51 meters of elevation. And it, not that it really matters, but that 8 kilometer difference the day of was pretty massive. So
Yeah, I can imagine. You really set me up for a twist there. I thought you were going to talk it down, but you talked it up. So well done.
I just wanted, not that I don't want it to be like it doesn't really matter, but
No, I know, totally. No, I appreciate knowing that it was more. That's is super cool. So uh talk to me about your relationship with performance then, because we've talked about visiting the land instead of conquering, and you've just said the numbers don't matter and this was more of a self-belief thing. And you know I think hopefully you have given yourself some things to believe in about yourself, because that's a really serious run that a lot of people would never even consider, even if many people in Canmore and mountain towns do things like that. So in order to finish that, in order to run 65 kilometers and do 5,100 meters of elevation in less than 24 hours, you have to have a an ability to perform at a high level for a long period of time. So talk to me about your relationship with trail running and your relationship with performance, and what that means to you.
yeah, I think I wonder, I don't necessarily see it as performance. Like if you're like, why do you do these things? And it's like, I just love to do them. But also I like, and I think it kind of goes back to the tree planting thing. Like I was thinking like all of my friends here now haven't tree planted and so they don't understand it. And they're like, why do you do it? It sounds awful. And I was like, it is. It's like the worst time ever. And you're like wet and cold and hungry and you've just worked hard all day, like 8 hours, and the only thing that keeps you going a lot of the time is that you're gonna come home to supper, and then you get to shower, and it's like the fact that those things are so big and they feel so great. And I think when I go out on really long runs, I like I don't know, I get to learn a lot about myself. I get a lot of time to process my emotions. But I'm just like the long slog, it's just so appealing because I'm like, oh, I get to come home and eat. Or like I don't know if it has to be a little miserable for a bit to be like, I get a shower. And like, I don't know. Shiny, flashy things don't seem that appealing to me. And so like even when I was like living out of my car, like when you're like, oh, I get to shower today, I get to go to the gym and have a shower for the first time in 4 days, you're like, I don't know, the little things become so big, and I think that's what I really value about it. And so you say like performance, like it was never like, and for me running has never been a question of like how fast can I do it, or like in a competitive way or anything like that. It's just like I'm just like how longer can we make the slogs? like I like I don't know, I'm like can I suffer a little in this?
So essentially, you're trying to see how far you can suffer in order to make the reward even better.
I don't know, yeah.
Yeah,
I
that could
don't know.
work.
It's so interesting because it's like you could be like, "Oh, I could come home and eat ramen," any other day. And you could be like, what do you really want in life?" And it's like every time I'm like, I kind of want to suffer so that the small things feel so big. Like, when you wake up in the morning and you're like, maybe it's like an awe thing. Like I'm like, "Oh, I'm so excited to drink my morning coffee today." And it's like I have the same cup of coffee every morning, but I'm like, I don't know. I have a big trip coming up and I'm not like, "Oh, I'm so excited to go on this big trip. It's like the center of my whole life." It's like, I don't know. I'm like, my morning coffee looks so good. Like it's like I could like have a bunch of money and still think about like what's my rich life, and it's like I still want the little things to feel really big and to appreciate those things and for them to feel like maybe enough. And I think that's like why partly I trail run. Like on the now I'm rambling, but like on the day of the quad, like I remember a lot of the suffering and stuff, but like I had friends come out from Calgary and they like crewed me the whole day. Like so every time I would come down from a mountain, they would be sitting there in like a little friend group, like having a picnic, and I'd roll in and they'd like make me coffee and fill up my water bottles and like feed me food and they'd all be laughing and I'd be like, oh, all my friends are just together having a great time and we're all laughing and like I just got to run a mountain to get like I'm sure we could do that, but like but I was like this is the best day ever because we're all just hanging out having a good time and like I know that like however much it sucks, I'm going to come down and like get a new pair of socks and like I don't know, be able to check in with them and like they also take care of you. I was always like, if you ever want to feel loved, just like run an ultra and get your friends to come crew you because you're like, you could be like, I want a new shirt. And they're like, here's a shirt. And you're like, I want this random food from town. And they're like, okay, I'll go get it. And I'm like, it's just so much fun. But it's like, I think that was like the best part of it all. And so I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's not performance, but it's like, this pursuit to make the small things in life feel really big still.
Yeah, I think that's really important. This is something I've been thinking about a lot for maybe a year now is the question of like really what is joy? And I
Mm,
think when I was younger, joy was this abstract idea, and generally for me, it existed in another country or on the other side of a mountain or doing this incredible experience. And I did those things, many of them, and they were very at times euphoric and they were often very validating. But it also occurred to me recently that almost nothing I've ever like tangibly achieved in my life has really ever made me joyful. True joy is exactly that moment you were describing when you're sitting with your friends and like you're tired, but like you're all just there together and laughing, or the joy of like a day off in a tree planting camp and you're in the forest by a lake or something like that and everyone's exhausted and just beat to hell, but you're together and life is so simple. And
yeah.
like it sounds like what you're doing is you're using this as a way to remind yourself, hey, the joy is with me all the time, and you just have to go climb 4 mountains to remember.
Maybe in ways you have to suffer a little. But I think there's also like a calling, not a calling. There's like something drawing me to it, obviously. And it's not just so that like I get to hang out with my friends, but and same with tree planting, like I think inherently a lot of people that go tree planting are very similar. Like it's not I think goals are really good, but I think they're just good to like make sure that you're like on the process of something. You know? If I never finished that goal, I wouldn't like I'd be like, okay." And like right now I am kind of like not like what's next, but it's just nice to have something to be like now I can run like otherwise I won't do it. Like I really won't. If I never had anything, I would never go out for really long runs. It just gives me a little bit of a direction and like a little flame under my butt, which not everybody needs, but sometimes I need. And maybe right now I need, but like maybe in 10 years I'm like, oh, that no longer serves me. But yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to push back on the fact that not everybody needs direction, because I truly think everybody needs purpose, and
Yeah.
direction and purpose are sometimes interchangeable, probably a lot of the time, and it might be less tangible than climbing a mountain. It might be a little bit more nuanced, like being a good parent, for example. But I think without that, I know the times in my life where I've felt purposeless and without really a sense of real purpose have been really, really challenging. It's very hard to sit still in that feeling, and that doesn't mean, to tell you the truth, a lot of the reasons that I've done the things that I've done, such as traveling or going on these kind of adventures, have actually stemmed from a feeling of purposeless. And the until I was about 30, the quick fix to purposeless was I would book a flight somewhere. I would book a flight to China or, you name it. The more adventurous, the better, because then it gave me purpose. But it ties back to the joy piece as well. It's as we get older and as we experience more of life, I've started to learn again that purpose isn't something that you go out and find. It's something that you build. And
Mm,
you could, for me, it's a community is a huge part of that. Like that moment where you described, I mean, I picture a green field, all your friends sitting in a green field, and they're there to support you, and you're creating community in that space. Like it honestly, like almost like gives me chills. Like it feels so nice, and like that's joy and purpose combined into this really beautiful moment. That's really what life's about, if you ask me. And yes, we all need to make money and we all need to survive. But as I get older and I learn the lesson again and again and again that nothing I ever do really fills the void the same way as how I feel when I'm with people and how I feel when I'm in those moments of those really special moments of community.
Do you feel it when you're in it? A lot of the times I feel it in retrospect.
Great question. I think that up until very recently, I would only ever feel it in retrospect. And you might look at it after and go, wow, that was really special. In the moment, you're caught up in something. Now, I feel it in the moment some of the time, and I look for it. So I think it's something you can learn to appreciate in the moment, the same way that you can learn to appreciate, to circle right back to the beginning. I've learned to appreciate going outside every morning and just standing on the grass,
Mm.
and feeling the air and hearing the birds. Like I have learned to appreciate that in the moment and going, wow, this is for me, this is what life's about. So yeah, I think you can. Do you feel it in the moment?
I think with certain things. I
Yeah.
think a lot of time I look back and I go, wow, remember those days? Like, you know? I do that
Yeah,
a lot. I
totally.
romanticize the past a lot, and maybe I romanticize the future a lot, and maybe it's like an active tool to do it in the present that I haven't quite caught the hang of.
I think so. I think everyone has to work at it. I mean, like, yeah, in my experience, I've spent most of my life probably thinking about the future or thinking about the past, anywhere but the present. The present's where it's the most difficult, You can romanticize the past or you can dream about the future. It's easier.
I kind of love doing it. Like I know that I should be on the future, but it's like, like yeah, I'll work on it. But
Well, everything in moderation, right?
yeah, yeah, it's kind of nice.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about tree planting. Let's talk to that about that a little bit. I'm aware that probably a lot of our tree planting friends are going to listen to this and will know what we're talking about. But
Hi,
for the
friends.
people, hi friends, for the people that don't know what tree planting is like, we're not talking about going out into a field and popping a few trees in the ground. We're talking about planting trees on the side of mountains in the rain, getting stung by wasps, being dirty and wet and gross pretty much all the time, being exhausted all the time, um, freezing in the night when it gets below zero and you sleep in a tent in a gully. Um, all that really fun stuff for 2 or 3 months. But there is great joy in it as well. There's great community, which it's how we met. I've met some of my closest friends, and it is in a lot of ways performative. I mean, not maybe not for everybody. I've planted with
Hmm.
people who have really just been out there to, you know, look at the birds and have a good time, and they're very happy doing that. I was always very performance orientated with tree planting, but that's kind of go figure. Have been probably too much of a performance orientated person. How was it for you? Where was the line for you? Because I remember you saying to me sometimes, once or twice, you said to me, "I live for the days off," but then I also remember you working really hard. So, how do you balance the performance aspect of tree planting with the sanity and self care?
Isn't that a lifelong lesson? um, I found it easier last season to have a bit more balance, but maybe I was a bit more well rounded. In my first couple of years, I feel like I didn't balance it very well. It's very interesting. It has so many correlations to trail running, but like you just want it so bad that you're so narrowly focused on like numbers or like these really arbitrary like goals that like you will do anything to do it. Like I've like I don't know. I have a pretty lifelong maybe injury from planting, like
Yeah,
a
same.
yeah, a repetition injury. And I remember like in my second year being like, no, I have to like. I don't. It's so funny. You're like, I have to hit 4,000 trees every day. How long can I keep the 4,000 tree streak up? Or like, just silly things. And you're like, oh, I've sprained between my ribs. I've sprained my intercostal muscles, and I actually can't put on my own clothes anymore, and I can't like sneeze without being in significant amounts of pain. But you're like, I still have to go out and plant.
Yeah.
And it's so silly looking back on it. But when you're in it, you're like really in it. So I don't know if I've found that balance per se, but I'm not planting anymore, so maybe I don't have to.
The balance
But
was to leave.
yeah.
Just get out.
Truth be told, I have a really hard time with balance. I'm very much an all or nothing kind of person. And I actually find I adore that in other people too, which is like I would like to be a more balanced person, and I think some aspects of my life I am. But then when I am more balanced, I like see people that are so passionate about one thing, and I'm like, oh, isn't that so cool? And then I'm like, I want to be so passionate about one thing, but and then I can be, and then I'm like, I don't. Life feels good when I'm like really all in something.
Mm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. The I have such a distinct and recurring memory of tree planting, of waking up so tired in the morning, every morning, so sore, and you get into a truck and you sit there for an hour and it stinks and your muscles seize up and you like almost go to sleep but you don't, and then you roll out into this like destroyed forest in the middle of nowhere on the side of a mountain, and I'm like looking up at it at this steep piece and going like, oh, I'm just gonna take it easy today. I'm just gonna like try to make $400. I'm just gonna chill. And then I put like one box in, and then I'm like, I have to plant the most trees I've ever planted in my life, and if I don't, I'm a failure.
I don't do the failure part, but I just like when you're like in it, you're like, ugh, and then you get a couple on the ground, and then you're like, okay, it's on.
Totally, yeah. And I think I've often equated tree planting um, to performance sports in a lot of ways, because one thing that people who trail run or people who climb at a high level, or pick your sport, is that they have the ability to push themselves far beyond what the mind is telling them is possible, or what they really should do. And humans are so capable of that. Like we're really, as far as creatures go, we have incredible ability to adapt to pain and drive and move forward and just keep going. And tree planting was a great lesson in that. I really learned physically and mentally how much I could endure, and
Hmm.
that was a very good lesson. It doesn't mean I always choose to.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, except for tree planting, but in other areas I don't always choose to endure that much. But you know how far you can push yourself, and I think that's a really valuable lesson, even if you end up with a repetitive strain injury in your shoulder or a torn meniscus or whatever.
How do you feel now being out of it? Because I feel like maybe it's like there's like I have a slight mental fear that the further I'm out of it, the more that I'll become more comfortable and I'll be like forget that I could ever be that enduring. And so now I
Mm.
feel like I'm craving these long slogs of like either trail runs or like maybe in the future skiing or like these like really absurd things that aren't like necessarily athletic feats, but they put me in like that kind of space where I'm like, I have to endure. Um, but I'm like nervous the further I get out of tree planting, the more that I'll become like a comfort gal.
Yeah, like without constantly reminding yourself how hard you can go, you might inevitably make your ability to go hard less.
Yeah. Or it's like
Yeah.
I kind of picture like, you have like that one uncle that's like, I used to be a boxer. And you're like, how far away? Like, when do I become the person that I'm like, I used to be a tree planter and I'm like 20 years down the road and it's like, Auntie Lexie, just give it up already. Like,
Well, I think if that boxer uncle is saying that as a way to try to hold tight to that memory as a way of validating himself, then it's probably time to give it up. But I I never I never forgot the ability to work hard. I certainly I used to love validating myself through tree planting, and over the years I moved away from the relationship with that validation, but I never forgot that I could do that. But it would manifest in other ways because tree planting is as much a mental game as it is a physical game. So the mental output could be through your career, or it could be,
Mm,
I mean, I'm just pulling this like example out of thin air, but like let's say you have a family member or a loved one or a close friend who goes through something really hard for an extended period of time and they need support for an extended period of time. It's really hard on you to give that because you have an energetic quota. But when you know that you can push yourself physically and mentally out on the block, tree planting, you know that you can push yourself mentally for an extended period of time. I think that manifests in many other areas of your life. So I don't think it ever goes away. Certainly, we get older, we get physically older. I don't think that I would be able to consistently plant the same high numbers in fast land that I could do when I was 24. I certainly have no interest in
mm.
trying.
I don't want it.
No, but the mental ability to push myself to the same capacity is still there.
Yeah, I think so. And like when you were saying that, it reminded me of like actually when the quad was like I had never ran more than a half marathon before I did that. I think I was just like I'm an average Joe, and I think if I just believe in myself, I could do it. And I did. But that was like 22 hours of being like, no, you're gonna do something because you said you're gonna do it. And I just took a job that's like kind of in a leadership position. And I remember going to like one of my first team meetings and being like, I have to facilitate this whole team meeting. Like people are looking at me to do that. And now I'm like in this position and that seems really scary. And I remember driving there, I'm like, Lexie, if you can run the quad, you can run a team meeting. Like, you can do scary things.
So true. So true. Yeah, I always think like I particularly think about I'm a freelancer and I have launched various projects. I mean, even just starting this podcast was a huge amount of work when I didn't really know what I was doing. And if you could break that down into micro steps, there's probably hundreds. And I always equate it back to like, okay, this is going to be a really long journey to get this from not having a podcast to a monetized successful media platform. It's probably going to take a long time, but the only way you can do that is the same way you plant trees, which is by doing one at a time, taking one step at a time, planting one tree at a time. And some days are going to be more difficult than others. Some days you'll get less done. Some days you're going to fall over more. Some days you're going to get chased by a bear. But you're always going to get to the end of the season and you will have planted 150,000 trees and you've achieved a thing, you know? So that's been
Yeah.
the biggest lesson is like you can only ever really do something one step at a time. You can you can break that down into however you want. You can outsource other things, but ultimately you can only do the thing as fast as you can do the thing. And as long as you just kind of keep at it and keep moving towards it, it's the person with the most persistence, I think, and sometimes a little bit of luck that will get there, rather than the person who maybe has the ability but doesn't have the commitment, or has
Hmm.
the skills but doesn't have the follow through. I think that's been the most valuable lesson.
Yeah. I think that's like a life lesson in almost everything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it has been in my life. So um coming from I briefly touched on my background and my heritage. I found tree planting really enjoyable, but I also found it really uncomfortable at times. And
Mm.
what I mean is like there were moments when I pulled my head up from out of the ground long enough to kind of look around and recognize that I was part of this giant forestry machine that was like ultimately chewing up the land and turning into something that was different and was very destructive. Um, that was really unpleasant, and I tended to do the most I could to not think about that as much as
Yeah.
possible. How was that experience for you?
I think the same. I feel like it's the same for almost every tree planter. Like,
Yeah.
It's crazy because tree planting cultivates this environment that you love. Like, you get to hang out and live in a tent in the forest with 40 of your friends. Well, maybe they're not all your friends, but like, but
For anyone
it,
listening, you were our friends.
yes. But then you get to like, it's like, it's everything I want in life, but you have to like, I don't know, not turn a blind eye, but you have to be able to like digest your part in it all. And or like I think lots of people struggle with like trying to make meaning out of it, um, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it was very hard for me too to be like, how am I a part of the system? And then you justify how you are a part of the system. And I even like I've even if I was implanting now, I'd still struggle with it completely to be like, um, well, I don't know. I think it's a sustainability question. It's a very large environmental question. Um, it's definitely like logging is not something I really support in a lot of capacities, but understanding that people need wood and it has its place, but maybe we don't need as much wood. And then in my own life, I was like, maybe I just consume less, if like a personal thing. And then I was like, maybe I consume more. Like, even last summer, I was like listening to a lot of like nerdy by nature podcasts to like, maybe I should understand the system more that I'm even in, from like a legal standpoint or an economical standpoint. And I feel like I never figured it out. Or maybe you don't figure these things out and it's just like, yeah, I don't know. I didn't, it was hard and it hurts me to even think about the amount of times I've flown up in a helicopter and like overlooked northern Alberta or like had like the map layouts for like all of northern Alberta and being like, wow, it's like all cut blocks and how hard on the soul and spirit that is. Um, and I don't know. Sometimes I turn a blind eye, sometimes I let it hurt me. So in other glimmers of life, I'm like, do you really need that thing? You don't need to buy it. And you just
Yeah.
hope that maybe people only need one home and not two, and we can all under consume a lot more than we do. But
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. On a personal level, I've had the same conversation in my head. I don't know how many times, 100 times. And for a while I thought to myself, because I had 3 years off, right? I was like, oh, I just won't plant anymore. Like I'm done. But then I went back, and it was a really easy decision to make it was when it was a good financial decision. And I think that's really ultimately people are just doing the best they can. I don't think there's a tree planter out there that wants to destroy the forest.
no,
um, Probably people have more or less concern about, or more or less, or think different things about how effective the environmental measures are or aren't. But at the end of the day, it's not something that I've easily been able to reconcile. I think one way I'm attempting to do that now, and this is a good circle back, is to try to build that relationship with land that I never really had. In fact, I think, yeah, I would say I had the opposite of a relationship with land. I think I saw land as a resource, and that meant, maybe wood or animals or physical space, and had a very consumer approach to it. And
mm,
I think it's not going to, you know, me going outside and standing on my lawn and listening to the birds does not undo the damage, but
yeah.
it is something that I can hopefully grow and cultivate, and then have a positive impact on other people. And time marches on, as my grandmother would say, and more people can hopefully learn that, and we can start to do exactly what you said. Maybe have one home instead of two, or integrate a little bit more connection with the land into our homes, into our communities, give back in what ways we learn how to, instead of just going out there and, cutting everything down.
I think it's really interesting as you're talking. I was thinking, which maybe I should have been listening a bit more, and which I was, but
You're allowed to think, it's okay.
I'm trying to be a better listener as well. um, like thinking about like how we consume things and how inherently maybe this is also a rife I've had with Canmore, and it's all interconnected, but like how individualistic things are, and how much, like, if you think about yourself as a consumer and you think about if your actions have impact your actions have impact in your relationships, then you have a level of responsibility to the people. But how much our individualistic society and lifestyles has like given way to for us to have actions that we don't think about the consequences to, or like good or bad. um and if you did, like, I was even thinking about, like, I might start, well, I hope to, I've put it in the universe to start my own hunting journey. And I think about, like, you were talking about, like, oh, wood to consume, animals to consume. And I have seen a mainstream hunting culture that is like, oh, I got this thing, and maybe it's a little ego filled. But I
Mm.
think it's like, if you shed away all of your ego, or you try to, at least, I know it's impossible, but to be like, I'm just like one spirit and this other spirit's providing for me. This is very ingrained in indigenous culture and all of our teachings and stuff in ceremony. So I'm so grateful for that, because I have a constant reminder of all of these like lessons that I want to learn in my life, and all of these values I hold, which is ultimately what the film is about, is bringing values of a human being into all of the things that you do. Um, but you would be like, I am this thing, this animal has a spirit, and like I feel like it would be such an emotional thing. I've never done it, but to like kill another spirit so that it can provide for you, like, and you maybe we think about that in terms of wood, and maybe if we like we see things as spirits, then we have more of this like reciprocal responsibility then to like make sure that how we're moving throughout the world is very interconnected and like not individualistic.
Yeah, that's so true. That I was thinking about something while you were speaking, and I was thinking about in Braiding Sweetgrass, which I mentioned that I'm reading. There's a part in there that says that the indigenous languages that the author is familiar with, they refer to trees, animals as not things but as people,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I think that's, I mean, when I read that, I was like, bing, like this is a perfect place to start. Like, let's start thinking about all
Yeah.
these other beings out there as people, not as things. And maybe the first place to start for someone who is thinking about how to build a better connection with land, or has watched your film, or is hopefully listening to us talk.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like that has always been a way of life. That has always been maybe how we have, but we've come not everybody, but I think society as a whole has come so far away from it that we've forgotten. Maybe it's like this aspect of forgetting, and slowly through conversations and or authors writing beautiful work or small films that are coming out, that people can start to remember.
Mm. Yeah, because it does feel, for me, it does feel like remembering. It doesn't feel like learning something entirely new. It's like when you, maybe everyone experiences this, when you go for a walk in the woods, or you swim in a pond at dawn and it's just you, or you get that moment to yourself when you're out in nature, and you really open yourself up to it, to experience it. It doesn't feel like something new so much as it feels like returning, or
Yeah.
coming back to something. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. There's this really, really cool, beautiful piece of poetry that I've read, or like a writing from this indigenous climber. She's like talking about climbing on like the face of a grandfather, and how like the like it's like red earth, red body, and like how like maybe the people that have come here, she's like, I apologize for them in some capacity, because they forget from a time that they've been pulled from the earth too. Not that they haven't, they have, but it's been so long and they've forgotten. And so like my apologies on their behalf,
Hmm.
essentially. And I was like, yeah, because I think everyone at some point has come from the earth, and we have forgotten, or some people have. Or
But the poem also, I guess, implies or says that that can be reversed, even if we're doing it on behalf of those before us.
Yeah, like a remembering in a way.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about your work with not-for-profit organizations. I'd really like to hear about that.
Yeah. Um, right now I feel like I'm involved in two really cool not-for-profits in the Bow Valley that kind of work to do the same thing but in different capacities. Like I work for my main job is I work for a charitable organization called Spirit North. We like co-create programs with indigenous communities to like help kids access sport and play. Um, so it's super fun. I'm like in indigenous communities a lot of the time playing in the forest and like learning and listening from them and also offering opportunities for like cross country skiing and bike riding and stuff like that. And then I work as a volunteer with a different non for profit called Soul of Mustaki, which is like we help Black Indigenous people of color access mountain based sports and recreation, to like build a community to each other and to self and to the land. And so those are like two different ways that I feel like I've been allowed to bring my passions into like really meaningful work. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, Lex. Well, that is really awesome to hear. I'm really excited to see more of your work in not for profits, and I'll make sure that those sites are in the show notes below so that people can check those out. And thank you so much for being here with me on the Journey podcast. When I started this journey, you were one of the first people that I wanted to get on because it's just always such a pleasure to talk to you and to hear your perspective on things. And thank you very much for not making a single comment about my Australian accent. I really appreciate that.
I feel like I could understand you this time, which is maybe a growing thing in our relationship. Maybe it just took time.
It took a lot of time. Well, it's been a pleasure, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Matt. This has been really nice.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Journey podcast. For links and information about today's episode, check out the show notes below. If you'd like to support this podcast, the easiest and most impactful way to do so is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review or comment. Or please share your favorite episodes with friends, family, or on social media. That's also incredibly helpful. If you'd like to get in touch or you'd like to read my book, Last Train North, the easiest way to get into all of that is at my website, matthewchanner.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, enjoy the journey.